Hello and welcome back to the Ship of Thesis and our Crusader Kings 3 tutorial series. If you've joined us today, then it's probably because you want to learn all about eugenics and creating your own master race inside of Crusader Kings 3. And welcome, we're going to discuss exactly that topic after the following caveat. This particular topic is quite involved, complicated, involves a lot of maths and concepts and all sorts of things behind the scenes. So, I am familiar with the concept that there are kind of really two types of people in the world. There are those people who are stat nerds, who are very number crunchy, they love charts, and they love information all displayed in front of their eyeballs, and it makes them go, oh yes. And then there are, well, people who don't want that, and they just want to be like, well, Ship of Thesis, can you just get to the point? So, this video is exactly that. We're starting out with the too long didn't read version, and we're going to just show you the very bare bones of how you actually get all of this stuff going. I'm then going to follow it with another video that I'm not sure will do as well, but it depends what my audience is really like. So, anyway, let's not worry too much about that. Right now, we're going to talk straight into the concept of what you do to make great heirs. So, first up, from a too long didn't read version, I have used console commands to give my leader here the fecund trait and to give his spouse the fecund trait. And then I console commanded the hell out of her in order to create lots and lots of children. So you can see this one here has the fecund trait, and this one, and this one, and this one, but not this one. And that's the first concept that we're going to discuss. Basically, from a too long didn't read sort of stance, if you make sure that the two people who are doing the nasty have a particular trait, a physical congenital trait, you need to hover over it and make sure that it's congenital, then it will pretty much pass on to your heirs. You don't really need to worry, that's nice and easy, just do that and it'll all work. However, sometimes, like in the case of this unpronounceable child here, it just, well, won't. And the reason for that is because there's a concept of dominant and recessive genes. If you want to know about this in more detail, watch my next video where I'm going to talk much more in depth about it. But you're here for the too long didn't read version, right? Basically, sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the time, look, it does. It works on all of these kids, but it doesn't work on this one. So from your perspective, just make sure that the two people that you want to breed have the trait that you want. Now, the next thing that you need to be aware of is that when you are breeding down the line and you decide to include more and more traits, there needs to be a kind of marathon approach to this, not a sprint. If you try and do all of this in one go, you're gonna lose traits, and we're gonna kind of display that next. Right, so that's exactly what we've done here. We've given fecund back to King Murchad. We've done away with all of his children. We've started again from scratch, and we've given fecund again to Princess Maria, but we've also made her a genius. We're now going to console command the heck out of the poor girl and make her pregnant all of the times with instant birth enabled, and that's going to show you what this will look like. So, having produced a fair few babies by now, you can see that Murchad was fecund and his wife was fecund and genius, so she possessed the same trait. So you'd think, based on our previous example, that fecund and fecund means that fecund is gonna pass on, right? You'd be wrong. Our first child was merely a genius. I mean, that's a pretty damn awesome trait to inherit, but she didn't get fecund. The second child, she was quick and fecund, and also sickly, but that's kind of more random than anything. But these two are like traits that should pass on, and you can see we did pass on fecund, but we passed on a lesser version of quick. The third child was fecund, but not a genius. The fourth child was quick and fecund again. The fifth child again was fecund, but this time a genius. And the last child was a genius and fecund. So you would not be able to pop out babies anywhere near the speed that I did here, where these are all literally 0 years old because I console commanded the crap out of it. But hopefully you get to see the sheer variance of things that popped out here. Being able to produce multiple traits really needs both the parents to possess those traits because of the aforementioned dominant and recessive genes. And like I said, I'm going to go into that in a future video if it's something that particularly interests you. But for now, just be aware that if it's on your profile, it's dominant. If it's missing from your profile, it's not. So in theory, Murchad here could have genius as a recessive gene. If his parents had it, I mean, they don't. So, like, our grandfather doesn't, and our great-grandfather doesn't, and our wherever our actual parent is doesn't either, right? But in theory, they could do, and that might make the gene recessive for us. In the case of our wife, she has both of these traits, and her parents do not, because, again, we console commanded the crap out of this. But in theory, they could do, and that would, again, increase the likelihood that this would happen for us. The main thing for you to be aware of is that if you have traits, you need to try and pair them with traits. And that's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to produce those heirs that have both those traits. The point is, you're going to need to do an awful lot of breeding. And that's why I actually bothered to include the fecund trait here, because it increases your fertility by 50%. Like I said at the beginning, this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. You're going to need to do this over multiple generations. And you're also gonna have to be aware that you might end up introducing some traits that you do not want as well. So fecund and genius are fantastic traits, but if we press C and have a look at the character screen here, we could look for something like imbecile. That is a congenital trait, and it is really, really bad. -8 in all your stats and -30 lifestyle experience, not what you want on your characters. However, I mean, that's like one of the worst case scenarios. If you're doing an awful lot of inbreeding, which you might do, like I said, you might produce lots of children that have these traits, and then in turn marry them off and breed them together, then they kind of might end up with the inbred trait like this here. And as you can see, that's -5 to every single stat, and -50% to fertility, a massive health penalty, and people kind of don't find you attractive anymore because you look a little bit Habsburg. So you're going to need to be aware of that. However, there is also the possibility that you will end up with the pure-blooded trait, and that is pretty damn good. That gives you plus 10% fertility and a small health boost, and an inbreeding chance dramatically drops by 50%. But I'm not going to spend much time talking about that in this video. That's definitely for a future video. I'm going to try and wrap this one up right now with a bunch of things that you really need to focus on. So, just to give you a quick summary, there are a few important things for you to pay attention to as part of this. Make sure that you have a trait and your spouse has a trait, and if you do that, you will end up with babies that maybe will have that trait. If you're trying to breed another trait into your dynasty, basically, try and make sure that that trait, if it's a tiered trait, has the highest tier available on both. What do I mean by that? If you're a genius, make sure that you and your spouse are a genius. Otherwise, you might end up with children like this one, or maybe not this one, this one. This one, there we go, this one here, that has a lesser version of the trait. That can happen. So try and make sure that your spouse and your character actually have the highest level stat if that's something you're trying to breed in. Try and breed out bad traits. If you end up with an imbecile, for instance, then try and breed them with somebody who isn't an imbecile, and you dramatically increase the likelihood that you will breed that out. Bear in mind that it does take several generations to get it out of your bloodline. Your parents do count, and your grandparents do count. In fact, 4 generations do count when it comes to actually breeding your characters. Also, bear in mind the legacies. You can get to those by clicking on your shield here and clicking on the open legacies. The blood legacy here is very, very useful. I'm not going to go into too much detail. That's for my next video. But just bear in mind that these 3 levels here, Noble Veins, Convergent Blood, and Resilient Bloodline, will dramatically help you in making sure you get positive traits and not negative traits, and that you can breed decent people into your dynasty. If you do all of these things, then you will probably end up with a pretty decent bloodline. And if you're somebody who's more casual and just wants to kind of go, hey, I just want to play a little bit and make sure I get a decent dynasty, then everything that I've said in this video so far, and spoke far too quickly and I appreciate, will help you out. If, however, you want to know what goes on under the hood, you want to look at a little bit more stats, you want to see this explained in greater detail, then please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and be back for my next video where I will explain in further detail how this works. In the meantime, however, I thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.